Hey everyone, how you doing today? My name's Kirsty, aka Beth Bookish, and on today's video I am bringing you my October reading wrap-up. It is really weird filming this, knowing that when I edit and post this, I will be in another country on the other end of the planet, in a different hemisphere. It's just such a trippy feeling. I'm also quite delayed in starting this because it is quite late into October now, and normally when I do this video I like to start it as soon as I finish my first book so that the review is fresh and new in my mind. But obviously that didn't happen this time round, and so I'm going to start it now and just talk about the books that I've finished so far in October because, touch wood, I think my reading slump that I've had since July has finally offed into the sunset. Well, it's sunrise right now because it's only just gone 8 o'clock in the morning. I think my reading slump is finally over. I'm not quite fully back into my mojo, and I am finding that right now audiobooks seems to be what's working for me because I've completed more audiobooks in the last month and a half than I've done for the rest of the year, and I'm finding that when I try to physically read, I'm struggling. I started the month on the 1st of October. I read, well, that's sort of like the 1st to the 3rd, I read The Lightcrest Contract by somebody. Luna Lawson. I read The Lightcrest Contract by Luna Lawson. I will be talking about this in more detail in another vlog that should be coming very soon. I think you will probably see that after this one, where in January, along with Meredith from Bin Chicken Books, Ren from The Reading Ren, obviously, Sasha from Sash Reads, and Zoe, who, as far as I'm aware, doesn't actually have a YouTube channel. But basically, we are all going to a romantic affair in Adelaide, and I've started a reading vlog where I'm reading books in preparation for it to find out if there's any authors that I'd like to meet or any books that I want to pick up while I'm there. Spoiler alert, it's not been going great, but one of these books was The Lightcrest Contract by Luna Lawson. I was attracted to this because it was a paranormal sapphic romance with a werewolf pack, and I have definitely cemented the fact that I do not like Omega-verse books in any way, shape or form. I don't like how Omega-verse basically is you've got the alphas, the betas, and if you are an Omega, you are basically considered nothing. And it's everything I hate about society, where just because you were born different, you are treated like you are less than the dirt on the ground. And this character, literally, she's just taken over her father's business and no one wants to do business with her purely because she's an Omega. For no other reason. Like, ignore the fact that she's got a degree, ignore the fact that she knows ignoring the fact that she's got the potential to be a really good business owner, because she is an Omega, don't want to work with her. And so, of course, the alpha, who is the alpha of a pack, who's like the alpha, is the one that comes in and swoops to her rescue. Only she does it by forcing her into a situation that she has no control over, and then doesn't talk to her about anything, yet they fall in love. I'm not here for it. I don't like it. I gave it 2.5 stars. The book was so short, it was like not even 200 pages long, and yet it was too long. And there were bits where it kept talking about how there was Christmas, because I didn't realise it was set at Christmas, otherwise I would have waited until December to read it. But it was like at least 3 of these pages just described the Christmas trees and how they were decorated, and I was like, this book could have been set any time of year and it would have made absolutely no difference to the plot. I don't understand why you're bringing Christmas into it when there is no need for it and it adds nothing to the story, and you're just wasting pages that are already very, very small to begin with. Wasn't a fan. I only gave it 2.5 stars. And yeah, just it was not my thing at all. And I definitely do not enjoy those kind of power dynamics. I'm all for when you've got a dominant and a submissive. I don't mind those kind of power dynamics, but when it's a bullying type, I'm better than you because I'm an alpha and you are nothing because you're an omega. I don't like that. So yeah, that didn't go well, but I will actually talk about it a bit more in that vlog, so please do go, like I said, keep an eye out for that. Then I went to, because naturally I'm leaving the country, my brain was like, I desperately now need to read all the books on my shelves. And I was like, cool, well, we've got all of these books that are unread and are on the TBR shelves. Let's try and get some of those done. Maybe the ones that are on our TBR this month. Or we could reread a series that we've reread about 7 or 8 times in the past 15 years and just restart it again. Yeah, I did that. This is Samurai Deepa Kyo by Akamine Kamiyo. This is in my top 5 all-time favourite series ever. It was kind of like the first sort of really mature one that I read when I was about 15, 16. And I really loved. It's got a found family dynamic, it's samurais, it's got a tiny hint of magical realism in there, in that there's no sort of actual magic, but they definitely have superhuman abilities that they're like, oh, it's because they're a samurai. It's like, you know, those kind of fantastical elements within the samurai genre that happen quite a lot. It has all of that, but I love it so much. Unfortunately, I don't own volume 1 I don't own volume 1. I used to own sort of volume 1 to 23. I think volume 1 got loaned to someone who never returned it, and then gradually over the past sort of 9 or 10 house moves, books have disappeared or gone to other people, and yeah, I've got 2 and 3, 2, 3, 4, and then I've got like 7, 8, and then 10, 11. So I do want to try and get them, but they are now all out of print. I mean, they're Tokyo Pop for one, which is a company that hasn't existed for a while now. So it's really difficult and expensive to get hold of them, and I really regret not holding on to them when I was younger because they are so hard to find now. We originally start by following Shina Yuya, who is a bounty hunter, and she comes across this young man called Mibu Kyoshiro. He's a medicine peddler, kind of just a wanderer. She sees him and recognizes him from her bounties list, and she's like, hey, I think he has a bounty on him. So it's her intention that the next time they're in a town, she's going to betray him and give him to the bounty hunters and claim her money. Only along the way, they come across some bandits and thugs who almost kill them, except for one problem. When Kyoshiro draws his sword, he turns in to this guy. Mibu Kyoshiro is actually only one of 2 souls trapped in this body. The body that she knows, this is Kyoshiro's body. This is his body. However, after the Battle of Sekigahara, some stuff happened and this guy's soul ended up also trapped within. This soul is Demonized Kyo. Demonized Kyo is the killer of 1,000 men. He's not a great guy. He's a perv. He's a lech. He's awful, and yet he's such a fun character, and he has like golden moments where he shows that he cares. But you've got Kyoshiro, who is so gentle and soft-hearted, and then Kyo, who is the killer of 1,000 men. It leads to some very entertaining situations. And then Yuya realizes she can turn Kyoshiro in and get the teeny tiny 100 mon reward, which is basically the equivalent of maybe, say, £10 today. Or she can stick with him until she reaches a point where she can turn Demonized Kyo in and claim the £10 million reward on him. Bit of a no-brainer. So she ends up sticking with these 2, and they end up going through this adventure where Kyo is trying to find where his real body is being kept so he can put his soul back into it. Kyoshiro is trying to stop that from happening, but along the way they also meet up with a group of people who are connected to Kyo, and then some other mysterious stuff starts to happen, and they all kind of end up having to try and sort of save the world. And it is amazing. I absolutely love all of the dynamics. It's got a very kind of, if you've watched, say, Inuyasha, Bleach, you know, where you start off with like 1 or 2 bad guys and they're like little thugs, and then by the end of the series you're basically fighting the whole universe and things just ramp up every single season. Very, very similar with this. But I just really love the characters in this. And I do like the fact that it's not really a magic-based system. It is mostly about people with, yes, bigger than life abilities, but also really, really cool techniques. And it is just so good. I don't really read historical fantasy manga, but when I do, it's Samurai Deepakyo. Those both got 4 stars. And then we have definitely going to be a contender for Book of the Year, and that is Little Thieves by Margaret Owen. This is book 1 in the Little Thieves trilogy. I first came across Margaret Owen when her debut released, The Merciful Crow. It was one of the books in a fairy loot back in either 2019 or 2020. I waited until the second book came out and then I binge read them back to back. And while I had some pretty big issues with the second book in terms of the characters not really acting in character, I've mentioned it before, I said there is something there. There's something about her writing. I can see she's going to become one of the greats in the future. And I was like, I just can tell she's got something even more amazing up her sleeve. And holy crap, did she deliver with Little Thieves. Even though this was a YA book, it didn't feel very YA until like the last sort of 2-3 chapters, where I will say it did go very cliche and very YA in nature, and it was like, it's kind of lost its unpredictability. But for the rest of it, the plot was so well done. I never knew what was going to happen. The characters were gloriously flawed. We are introduced to Vanya at the start of this book, and she tells us, I am not a good person. I am a thief. I am a liar. I am a this. I am a that. I stole someone's identity for the past year. And I've now been robbing hundreds of gold worth of jewels off people. And yet it's still shocking when in the book she does these things, because she just has so much characterization that every time you start to think she's one way, she becomes another, and it just bounced around so much. It was so good. I love the dynamic between her and Emmerich, the junior, what's the word? He is the junior prefect who was, at the start of the story, he was sent to investigate these series of thefts and robberies, and comes across as being like quite introverted and quiet and shy. And then we discover that he's not quite as he seems, and just the way the storyline went with that and with those two was so well done. And I also like that this is the first story I've ever read where not one, but 2 of the main characters, and in fact both of the characters in this main romance, are demisexual. And as someone who falls into that demisexual spectrum, it was so refreshing to have characters who weren't taking one look at each other and they're immediately in love or attracted. It took time for them to have any kind of that feeling, and when they did, they were like, oh wow, this is wow. And it was just so heartwarming to actually see what I go through with a romance in their story. And yeah, I just really enjoyed all of it. Ragnar was by far my favourite character. Her mother is one of the deities and her father was a human. So she's half human, half deity, but she's grown up with the deity side. She's able to shapeshift into different animals and people. And she isn't always quite up on the ways of the humans. Like, I love how she calls people, she doesn't just say like Vanya or Giselle, it's the Giselle, the Vanya. She calls people like the Vanya, and she kind of semi-talks in third person, but all of the characters were delights, and they were all just so great, as every human on the planet is. But it was just really great to see authentic, natural characters with believable personalities. And yeah, I was rooting for all of them. I hated the evil guy. It was such a good story, and multiple times where I thought I knew where things were going and it didn't, and I was like, whoa. So that one absolutely got 5 stars. The world building was incredible, and it was weaved in such a way that we weren't getting loads of info dump and loads of historical background. We only got told what we needed to know about the world within the context of what was happening with Vanya at that time. There weren't pages and pages of unnecessary info dumping, and it was just perfection, especially for someone who does not care about world building generally. And I've said multiple times that world building for me has to be weaved into the story in a way that it feels natural. This did it. And then finally, I really loved how the narration style was, because it's told through first person, but it isn't like a lot of these books that are told through first person, yet it still feels impersonal. It still feels like it's someone just like reading from a diary, like, I did this, I did that, I felt this. It was like Vanya was sat here like I am with you with this camera, and she was like telling me, this was my story, these were my thoughts at the time. Oh, but by the way, let's go back a bit. And she was like, wait, no, I didn't explain that well. Let me go back and explain it. And that was how it was written. And it felt slightly imperfect, and it felt like an unreliable narrator. And it was so well done. I just loved it. And I loved that style where it was almost not even almost, at times it was breaking the fourth wall. Like Vanya knew that she was talking to us and telling her story. So she wanted to make sure she did it right. And it was just so well done. And the audiobook narrator, Saskia Marveld, I think? Marveled, something like that. It was so, so good. I loved her voice, and I could just sit and listen to her all day. So yeah, 5 stars. Definitely in the running for Book of the Year. Anyway, that's where I'm at so far. So I've got a couple more books that I want to try and get finished, because obviously I'm only going to be in the country for 4 days of November. And I highly doubt I'm going to have a lot of time to read in that time. So I've got a couple of books that I started. I've got, some of them are on my Kindle, so it doesn't really matter if I don't get to them. But physical books, I've got the Boyfriend subscription that I started about 3 months ago, and it's just been sat there waiting for me to finish. And I've also got What Moves the Dead by T. Kingfisher that I started in September and haven't finished, but I'm still toying with the idea of DNFing that. I'm gonna head off because I'm about to run out of battery. So I'll catch you on the next update, where hopefully I might have read, I want to read at least 1 or 2 more things before I leave, but there's no guarantee. I did get book mail this month, very quickly. I have had 2 bits of book mail this month that I do want to share, and I would love to try and get both of these done before I leave, but one of them I do have it as an ARC on my Kindle, so I don't need to take the physical copy with me, but the other one, I don't have an ebook, so if I don't get to it, I think it will go on the plane with me. So the one that I have the ARC of is The Legend of the White Snake by Xie Li, who is the author of Fate Dates and Mooncakes, which is another one of my favourite books this year. Look how just gorgeous this cover is. I am, like, these colours and the detail and the gold foiling, I'm obsessed. It's stunning, and I also really like the colour of the book. It's just like this gorgeous blue. This is a queer retelling of the Legend of the White Snake, which is a Chinese mythology tale, and I just cannot wait to get to this one. And then the other one purely was, again, this one was purely a cover buy, and it was The Dark Becomes Her. This one is like a Rick Riordan? I don't know. But this one's like one of his picks, you know, like James Patterson, where it's like James Patterson presents. This is like Rick Riordan presents. But this is by G.D.I. Lin, who is the author of A Magic Steeped in Poison that I own and haven't yet read. But again, this one was a cover buy, because just, this is contender for cover of the year for me, because just everything about this is stunning. And even like on the back, I love it so, so much. This one is paranormal. Ruby is attacked by a ghost in the middle of Vancouver's Chinatown neighborhood, and basically her sister starts to change, and it looks like her sister has been possessed. As Ruby races to save her sister from demonic possession, she is thrown into an ancient battle over the gateway to the underworld. It just, like, even that is gorgeous. Like the little lotus. Even that is just so beautifully done. So yeah, 2 bits of stunning book mail, and these have immediately gone into potential book of the years for me, which is great. But yeah, like I said, this one I'll probably just read on my Kindle in Australia if I can, and then this one, I kind of want to start it in the next week, but if I don't, it will have to go with me on the plane, along with Only a Monster by Vanessa Len that I need to reread before I get to the 9th of November. So, yeah. Just thought I'd share those. Anyway, hopefully I will be with an update soon and I can cut this video down, because right now it's 30 minutes. So hopefully by the time you're watching this, it will be not 30 minutes long at this point. See you on the next update. Okay, no joke, you are going to see me in this outfit looking like this and talking about this book in 3 different clips. This will be the first one, but there are 2 more videos that you will see me, yeah, because I've basically got to say the same thing 3 times, but for 3 different videos. It's the downside of filming multiple sort of vlog projects in a row. But anyway, we're gonna get through this. I have put my notes somewhere, I think in this little stack, and I really don't want to drop the stack, so I might have to try and just remember what I was going to talk about, unless it's in this pile. Aha, found it. So, we have What Moves the Dead by T. Kingfisher. This is the next book that I've read in October, obviously, because this is the October wrap-up. I finished this finally. It did, once I got past that kind of like really slumpy bit, it only lasted for about another 4 pages. Then it finally did kind of ramp up a bit, but I still felt it didn't quite really fully go into the creep factor. And the ending of it and like the big reveal, I mean, it kind of already gives it away with the title. Even if you're not familiar with The Fall of the House of Usher, which I'm not, I didn't really know how it ended and I didn't really know the storyline, but I kind of gathered from this what ended up being the thing. I've got my little list here of like the pros and cons. So the cons were definitely the too much taken out of the story, too much unnecessary exposition. In the end, I think all the characters did play a part in the story, but I still feel like a couple of the characters just had way too much page time and were kind of like, okay. Certainly Alex's man, Angus, I felt like he was literally just there for one thing and one thing only, which I'm not going to say because spoilers, but I was like, he could have been completely written out and the story wouldn't have made any difference, in my opinion. And yeah, so I did still have those issues. I did still have a couple of moments where I found it very entertaining. There were a couple of like snort-worthy moments where it did make me laugh and it made me snigger, and I did have some fun times with it. A few people have critiqued the sarcasm and the sardonic nature of Alex and said that I saw Elizabeth from Plant-Based Bride especially was like, just didn't really like the tone that Alex had and felt that it was almost making too light of the situation. But I felt it actually went really well, especially there was like one bit where Alex was like, well, why wouldn't it be doing this considering everything else that's going on? And that's my kind of humour, where it's like, you know, always remaining sarcastic, always remaining a little bit like that, no matter what the situation. So I actually really enjoyed that side of it. I loved the bit where it was like when they first started to dissect the hair to find out what was going on with it. And it was like there were 3 veterans around that table and all of us screamed and scrambled. I was like, that's hilarious. And I can just picture that so clearly. So there were some really good moments. I also kind of felt like with the mycologist lady, we had like Miss Potter. I found it really random and so out of nowhere when it was like a very casual mention of her, I think it was her niece, Beatrix, and it was like, Beatrix Potter. And I was like, but there wasn't really any significant relevance there, and I felt like it was a bit of a really obscure thing to refer to. Like, okay, where did that come from? And I found myself a few times whenever she was mentioned after that, I was like, but what's the connection to Beatrix Potter? Why has that been made to be a point? And I don't know if that was just my autistic brain, where it was kind of like, I prefer stories where if you're going to bring in obscure references, or like if you're going to have those kind of references, I then expect that person to come up in some way, shape or form in the story, and she didn't. And I was like, okay, so why was that even made a point? But like I said, when the creep factor was on, it was fantastic. I genuinely was like uncomfortable reading this. There was one time I wanted to go to bed to finish it, but it started to get a little bit creepy, and I was like, actually, because I am someone who does have very vivid dreams and am extraordinarily easily influenced by things that I watch and read, probably best if I don't read this in bed just before I fall asleep. So it had really good descriptions. It had really good bits that did kind of make me go ugh, and give me that chill that I was looking for. But it just wasn't it. And for such a small book, I should not have had the trouble that I had with it. So in the end, when I ran it through Corepile, the atmosphere in this definitely saved it. Everything else was sitting around about the 4-5 mark, a couple of 3s, but the atmosphere, I did give it an 8 because, like I said, when the atmosphere was turned up, it was on and it was fantastic. So that did get an 8 and that brought it up to a 3-star. But yeah, I don't see the love, and I am really upset by that actually, because I wanted to love this, especially knowing how much Ren loves it. But I will say this is another book that I've read this year that's a little bit different to what I would typically pick up, and a little bit more on that kind of like gothic creepy side, and I've enjoyed the gothic creepy elements. So I'm starting to think that that is maybe a genre that I really want to explore more of in 2025, is these kind of sort of atmospheric gothic books. I definitely think that's where I need to focus my reading a little bit more and pick up more of those atmospheric reads, because I really think I'm going to have a good time with them. So yeah, that's where I'm at, and I'll speak to you in a bit with the final update for October. Okay, final book for the month, The Dark Becomes Her. I was hoping to get this done on by the end of October and not have to carry it into November. Unfortunately, I'm sick. It's been a journey. I ended up having to take a COVID test yesterday because I felt so unwell, and I was like, oh God, please don't tell me I've got it again. Thankfully that came back negative, so it looks like it is just a cold. I do seem to be coming out of it now, and so I'm hoping that by Monday, which is in 2 days, I will be absolutely fine for flying. But obviously, not only just because I don't really want to give other people a cold, but it's more I don't want to have like my ears blocked and nose blocked while on a plane. That will be very painful for me. But it does mean that it was November the 2nd that I did get it finished, so I'm still counting it in October. This follows a pair of sisters. One of them is starting to change, and the older sister, who all her life has been able to see these like ghostly apparitions and things, she realises there's something seriously wrong. I think in the last update I did mention about it, where her sister has been taken over by a spirit or some sort of demon. So I have things that I really enjoyed and things that I think could do with improving on this book. And basically, the thing that I really enjoyed the most was just how quickly I was able to get through it. It read very, very, very fast. Like, I came down this morning at 5 AM or 4:30. I started reading about 5 AM, and by 6:30 I'd read 200 and something pages and finished it. So it was a very quick, very easy read. It was very straightforward. It wasn't trying to sort of bring in really overly complex ideas. They were quite simplistic ideas, but they were really well written. So I really liked that. I liked the different sort of elements of Chinese and Taiwanese mythology that were brought into it. I liked how we had a smattering of Chinese words throughout and phrases. I was correct, there was a romantic element in here, but the one thing I really loved is that even when the romance became prominent and became a thing, it didn't take over the book. And the way that Ruby and Shen support each other, I really loved. There was only one moment where it kind of started to go into a bit of teenage angst, and I was like, oh, please don't do this. And then it didn't. It reined it back and it was immediately resolved. And I was like, thank God, because that is the number one reason I stopped reading YA, is because more with YA than anything else, as soon as there's any kind of romance, that's when the drama gets increased, and 9 times out of 10 it's completely unnecessary, or it's just way overblown. Even because I've said it before, a lot of authors seem to forget what it's like to be teenagers, and a lot of the time in YA, especially when it's been written by sort of older adults, like sort of in their 30s, 40s and onwards, I feel like they tend to write more caricatures of teenagers rather than what actual teenagers are like. Like, yeah, they are super dramatic and they are super over the top, but it just goes a bit further in YA literature, I find, than is strictly necessary. And I think a lot of the time authors forget that teenagers can actually be very mature. They are dumb, but they can be mature. So yeah, it was nice that these felt like actual like teenagers who have a logical brain in their bodies. They don't just rush off and try and do everything by themselves. They support on each other. They turn to the adults when they needed to. I really liked all that. I still loved all the musical elements in here. And it was a really well written story, and like I said, it was very, very well paced. It kept my attention, and yeah, I did have a great time. I also realised it's going to be at least a two-parter, because the way it ended, it's built for a sequel, and it says right at the very back that coming soon, more exciting, exhilarating horror from Judy Eileen and Rick Riordan presents. So yeah, that was all great. The only sort of real negative that I've got about it is even though this is a horror novel, I wanted a bit more from the horror side of things, especially with these being sort of older teenagers. There's a couple of like university age people in here. It wasn't sort of aimed at, you know, the sort of 13 to 14-year-old side of the YA. It was more aimed at the older teens. And I did feel like we could have done a lot more with the horror, and it could have really, really upped that creep factor. Because there were a couple of moments, certainly towards the end. There was one scene right at the end that I went, oh, because it was quite graphic without being extreme, but it really made me like, whoa, I wasn't expecting that. And I just kind of felt some of the earlier stuff, it started to really go in, but never quite fully went in. It did seem like it just felt a little bit like there were two ideas that each on their own were brilliant, but when they came together a couple of times they felt a bit clunky. And I'm not saying that it shouldn't have been included, because it should have, and it definitely was a key part of the story, and definitely for Ruby part of her like a major part of her development. But I just felt at times it was written a little bit heavy-handed, and it did feel a bit jarring. But other than that, everything was really good with this, and I did have a good time. The characters actually were a little bit more in depth. So like with Shen, he wasn't just, you know, the guy that comes and saves the day and oh, she falls in love. There was a little bit more nuance there. We learned more about his personality. We got a bit about his hobbies. We learned about Ruby and her hobbies, and I did like that every character had a bit more depth to them than just here's a character, there's one thing that we're going to tell you about them, and that's going to be the only thing you ever find out. We did find out various things, so I did like they felt well rounded. The story felt good. It would have worked just as a standalone, but I like that it's opened it up for potential and for a sequel, and I'm looking forward to it, and I definitely will keep it. And this is still, I'm about to film a video that is going to come up during Bookmas in December, but it's still a contender for book cover of the year for me because it is just so stunning. But yeah, I haven't actually run this through Corpile yet, but we're going to quickly do it now. Characters. Like I said, they were pretty well rounded, pretty well fleshed out. I did think they were good, but I do feel some of the motivations and some of the changes within the characters were a bit sudden and unexpected. So I'm going to give that a 7. Atmosphere, like I said, there were a couple of moments where it started to go into really atmospheric, but at no point, apart from once, I didn't really get much like real creep and horror from this. It just kind of felt very mid. So I am going to give it a 6 for atmosphere. The writing was fantastic. It was really well done. I loved all the Chinese elements. I loved all the way it was written, and the plot was well good, and the pacing was fantastic. So I'm going to give a 9 for that. It wasn't perfect, but it was very, very good. The plot, a little generic in the whole story. If you know something's wrong, I've now got to save the world, and then it's leading to more stuff in the future. But again, it was really done well, so I'm going to give that an 8. Intrigue is a 9. I didn't quite sit and read it in one sitting, but every time I sat down to read it, I read a huge chunk of it, and I didn't want to stop reading. Logic is where I'm going to mark it again a tiny bit lower. I'm only going to give that a 7. Overall enjoyment, I'm going to give it an 8.5 because I did enjoy it. It wasn't my favourite, but I did have a good time, and I am excited for a sequel, and it's definitely one that I would like to continue. So that means we have 7.79, and this one is going to be 4 stars. So to round out the month of October, we've got 4 novels, and I don't know how many graphic novels because I didn't check. Yeah, so we got 2 manga, 4 novels. I think that was pretty good considering how bad my reading slump has been lately, but I definitely already want to pick up another book, and I've got a few that I've still got on the go that I started last month, but those were on my Kindle, so they will be ones that I'll read like on the plane, but it means that I don't have to carry an extra book on the plane now, which is awesome. I just have the one book that I'll have on me, which is Only a Monster by Vanessa Len, that is going to be a reread. But yeah, that wraps up my October. Post-filming thought I was done, Kirsty, here with a forgetting to say that with Her Dark Becomes Her, as well as being a 4-star and being one that I really enjoyed this month, that is also the 50th book that I have read this year, which means that I have completed my novel reading goal. I'm still quite far behind on the manga one. I think I'm something like 30 books behind target. However, I'm not worried about that one because I know that Ren has got so much manga that I haven't yet read that I want to read. So I have no doubt that November is basically just going to be full of manga for me. So that's why I'm not stressing, but it does mean that I have now completed my novel goal. So any more novels I read this year through November, December means that they're extras and they just add towards the stats that I can give you when I do my end of year wrap up, which I usually post that one, like my stats and everything for the entirety of this year. I usually post that in January. But yeah, I'm excited. So a little celebration there because I completed my yearly goal as well as managed to get over my reading slump a little bit more this month. Let me know in the comments if you had a favourite book of October or a least favourite, let me know. But in the meantime, I hope you're all good, I hope you're staying safe. Don't forget to check out my Patreon, which is linked below, and I will see you on the next one.